What if I told you that the Vikings' greatest enemy was not neighboring tribes or stormy seas, but an invisible killer that crept into every home? The northern winter is unforgiving, and a single cold night could wipe out an entire settlement if it weren't for their unique survival techniques. They had no central heating, modern insulation, or electricity, but they created a microclimate inside their homes that today would be called an engineering marvel. These people turned house building into an art of fighting nature, where every stone and every blade of grass mattered. Their homes were not just shelters, but complex heat-preserving machines that worked according to the laws of physics, which we are rediscovering today. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how an architectural secret known as the thermal dome allowed the Vikings to walk around inside their homes in light clothing, while outside the temperatures were freezing.
The storm sounds fierce tonight.
Aye, glad to be inside by the fire.
Guess how long it took to create the perfect insulation that surpasses modern materials? The roof of a Viking house was not just protection from the elements, but a complex biological organism living its own life. The Scandinavians covered their longhouses with a thick layer of turf, cut from the dense northern soil along with the roots of grasses. This green carpet weighed tons, requiring powerful supporting structures made of oak or pine logs. However, this weight ensured that the roof fit perfectly to the walls, leaving no gaps for the icy wind to penetrate. The turf was laid in several layers, with the bottom layer placed grass side down so that the roots would intertwine with the roof frame. Over time, the grass sprouted through, turning the roof into a monolithic layer of earth reinforced with living roots. This layer of earth acted as an incredibly effective thermoregulator, smoothing out sharp temperature changes. In summer, such a roof evaporated moisture and cooled the house, preventing it from turning into an oven under the long polar sun. In winter, the earth, covered with snow, became an insurmountable barrier to the cold, preserving precious heat inside. In winter, a thick layer of snow settled on the turf roof, which the owners deliberately did not clear until a certain limit. Snow, thanks to its porous structure, is one of the best natural insulators known to man. Under this snow cap, the temperature of the turf itself never dropped to critical sub-zero levels. The result was a layered cake of wood, birch bark, earth, roots, and snow, which retained heat better than masonry. Even in the most severe frosts, when the outside temperature dropped to -30, the temperature under the roof remained above zero. Birch bark played the role of a modern waterproofing membrane in this construction. It was laid directly on the wooden roof frame in huge overlapping sheets so that water would run off without touching the wood. Birch bark does not rot for decades due to its tar content, which made the roof virtually eternal with proper care. Without this layer, the damp earth would quickly turn the supporting beams into dust, collapsing the house on the heads of those sleeping inside. It was a brilliant example of using the natural properties of materials available in any forest. The angle of the roof was calculated with mathematical precision to hold the snow, but not allow it to break through the roof with its weight. A roof that was too steep would throw off the snow, depriving the house of additional insulation. A roof that was too flat might not withstand the load during heavy snowfalls or the spring thaw. The craftsmen who built these houses passed on their knowledge of the ideal angles from generation to generation. A mistake in the calculations would cost the entire family their lives in the first snowy winter. The grass on the roof required maintenance, and in the summer, goats were often let loose on it to trim the lawn. The roots of the plants sucked excess moisture out of the soil, preventing the roof from becoming waterlogged. In dry years, the turf even had to be watered to prevent the grass from drying out and the soil from cracking. Cracks in the turf could become bridges of cold through which precious heat would escape. It was a true symbiotic relationship between the dwelling and the living world. Inside the house, under such a roof, the sound of the howling wind became only a quiet, distant hum. The earth and snow absorbed any noise, creating an atmosphere of absolute peace and security inside the room. This was critically important for the psychological comfort of people locked in a confined space for many months. The silence in the house allowed them to rest and recover after hard work in the cold. Sound insulation was a secondary but extremely pleasant effect of this technology. Interestingly, such roofs can still be found in Iceland and Norway today, even after 1,000 years. Modern architects are returning to the idea of green roofs for the sake of ecology and energy efficiency. The Vikings did not know the words ecology or carbon footprint, but their solutions were incredibly rational. They used what was under their feet to create masterpieces of sustainable architecture. We are only rediscovering what was the norm for northern builders of the distant past.
The local sourcing and thermal mass here are incredible. It's a truly sustainable design model for the future.
To build one longhouse, it was necessary to cut turf from an area equal to 2 football fields. It was a colossal task that involved the entire settlement or a large family. Each layer of soil was cut with special shovels with a specific geometry. This process united the community because the survival of one house depended on the help of neighbors. A single person would not have been able to build such a dwelling in the short northern summer. We are very interested in hearing your opinion. What do you think about the fact that modern insulation technologies often lose out to ordinary earth and grass in terms of durability? Write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analysis of ancient technologies. What if I told you that the shape of Viking houses was borrowed from ships, but turned upside down? If you look at a longhouse from above, its walls were not straight. They curved slightly outward, resembling the sides of a drakkar. This convex shape made the house incredibly resistant to lateral wind loads. The wind did not hit the flat wall, trying to knock the structure over, but smoothly flowed around it from the sides. Such aerodynamics allowed houses to stand for centuries on the windswept coasts. Right angles were extremely rare in Viking architecture, as they were vulnerable to freezing. An angle is a place where cold accumulates and where it is most difficult to provide quality insulation. The oval or boat-shaped form of the house minimized the number of dead zones, where air could stagnate and cool down. Warm air inside such a room circulated more evenly, flowing around the smooth curves of the walls. This was an intuitive understanding of thermodynamics based on centuries of observation. The doors in Viking houses were deliberately made low and narrow, forcing those entering to bow. This not only had a defensive purpose, making it difficult for an enemy with weapons to suddenly enter. The main purpose of such an opening was to conserve heat each time the door was opened. A tall door would release a huge cloud of warm air that had accumulated under the ceiling. A low opening allowed the cold to enter only at the bottom, without affecting the main thermal contour. The entrance to the house was often protected by a small vestibule or an extension that served as an airlock. A person would first enter the cold porch, close the outer door behind them, and only then open the door to the living quarters. This prevented a direct draft, which could instantly cool down the heated dwelling. Firewood and tools were also stored in these porches to keep them dry. The buffer zone was the first line of defense against the harsh external environment. Windows in longhouses were either absent altogether or consisted of tiny openings covered with ox bladders. Glass was not available in the north at that time, and an open window would have been an unaffordable luxury. The ox bladder let in a dim, murky light, just enough to avoid bumping into things during the day. Most of life took place by the light of the hearth, which created a special atmosphere of semi-darkness. The absence of windows made the walls a monolithic barrier against the cold. The walls were built of vertically placed logs, tightly fitted together. Often, a double wall construction was used, with the gap between the walls filled with earth or moss. The thickness of such a wall could reach a meter or more, turning the house into a real fortress. Wood itself is an excellent heat insulator, and in combination with an earthen layer, it became impenetrable. Outside, the logs were coated with clay or resin to protect them from wind and moisture. The floors in the houses were most often earthen, tightly packed by the feet of many generations. The earthen floor had enormous thermal inertia, heating up slowly and cooling down just as slowly. Sometimes the floor was covered with a layer of straw or reeds for additional insulation from the cold ground. Wealthy homes might have wooden floors raised above the ground, creating an air cushion. But even simple earth, if it was dry, served as a good foundation. The orientation of the house to the cardinal points was also not accidental. The ends of the building usually faced east and west, and the long walls faced north and south. The entrance was usually located on the leeward side, taking into account the prevailing winter winds in the area. This reduced the likelihood of the door being blocked by snow overnight. The Vikings knew how to read the landscape and fit their dwellings into it as organically as possible. Inside the house, the space was unified, without solid partitions or separate rooms. This allowed the heat from the central hearth to spread unhindered to all corners. Any partitions were made low or hung with skins so as not to interfere with air convection. Living in such an open space required special social norms, but it was necessary for survival. Privacy was a sacrifice made on the altar of warmth. Now ask yourself, could you survive the winter without a single window? In the next chapter, you will learn about the invisible ceiling that hung over the heads of the Vikings and saved them from death, but could kill them in a single night. Are you ready to learn the truth about how Vikings deliberately breathed smoke to survive? Inside the longhouse, there was no chimney as we know it, with a pipe and draught. Smoke from the open hearth rose and accumulated under the high roof, forming a dense, thick cloud. This black blanket hung over the heads of the inhabitants, slowly seeping through special openings in the roof. But this was not a mistake on the part of the builders, but a well-thought-out engineering solution. The layer of smoke under the ceiling acted as a powerful heat insulator, trapping warm air in the lower part of the room. The smoke created a heat dome, reflecting infrared radiation from the fire back down to the people. If the smoke had escaped too quickly, the precious heat would have gone with it, leaving the house cold. The Vikings lived in a layer of clean air near the floor, while a hot, poisonous atmosphere raged above them. Standing up straight on the bench would have meant getting your head into the suffocating zone. The level of smoke was regulated by opening and closing doors or special vents in the roof. An experienced housewife knew how to adjust the draft so that the smoke hung evenly at the right level. In severe frosts, the smoke vents were almost completely covered, deliberately increasing the smoke for warmth. Eyes watered, clothes were saturated with smoke, but it was better than freezing to death. The smoked walls and beams did not rot or get infested with bugs, which prolonged the life of the house. The soot that settled on the inside of the roof and beams also acted as insulation. Over the years, the layer of soot became thick and velvety, creating an additional layer. It absorbed heat from the hearth and slowly gave it back when the fire died down. This turned the entire roof structure into a giant heat accumulator. The black color of the ceiling visually dissolved into the dim light, creating a feeling of endless space above. The smoke also served an important hygienic function, disinfecting the room. In an era without antibiotics and antiseptics, constant fumigation killed bacteria and insects. Neither lice nor fleas, which were the scourge of medieval Europe, could survive in such air. Smoked products hanging from the ceiling were stored for months without spoiling. Thus, the heating system was also a preservation system. However, life under a smoke blanket required the strictest discipline and caution. Carbon monoxide, an invisible, colorless, and odorless killer, could accumulate at the bottom if ventilation was disrupted. People knew the symptoms of poisoning: drowsiness, headache, weakness. If someone started to fall asleep at the wrong time, they were immediately taken out into the fresh air. The ability to balance between warmth and suffocation was a vital skill.
The smoke! We must get him out now!
I have him! Quickly, outside!
Lung disease was a frequent companion of the Vikings, the price they paid for warm nights. Archaeologists find traces of chronic smoke exposure in the lungs of ancient Scandinavians. They were literally saturated with carbon from the inside, living in an atmosphere of constant smoke. Their voices were probably hoarse and rough, not only from commands at sea, but also from the air at home. But the alternative was death from hypothermia. The smoke vents in the roof were called lures and could be closed with wooden frames covered with translucent leather. These vents provided the only natural light in the house, falling in columns into the center of the hall. The most responsible members of the family were entrusted with controlling these hatches. During a storm, they had to be closed so that the wind would not blow out the fire, but the smoke would continue to escape. It was a delicate adjustment of a complex system. There was a saying that smoke only stings the eyes of those who are not working. A seated person was below the level of smoke, while a standing and working person was at risk. This encouraged people to carry out activities while sitting or outside, and to rest inside the house. Architecture dictated lifestyle and daily habits. The house forced people to bend down, to be closer to the ground and to each other. It was this thermal dome that allowed them to survive in conditions where snowstorms raged outside. Without this technology, the colonization of Iceland and Greenland would have been impossible. Be sure to like this video if you are amazed at the sacrifices people made for warmth. Guess what happened next when the Vikings realized that a regular fire couldn't heat a huge hall? They invented the langeld, a long fire that became the heart of their home. It was not a round fire, but an elongated hearth running along the central axis of the house, several meters long. This shape allowed the entire room to be heated evenly, not just the area around the fire. All life revolved around this fire. People cooked, ate, slept, and told legends here. The hearth was usually lined with stones, which acted as heat accumulators. The stones heated up during the day while the fire was burning strongly and continued to give off heat late at night when the flames died down. The choice of stones was critically important. They should not crack or explode from the heat. River boulders or special types of rock that were resistant to thermal shock were used. These hot stones were sometimes placed in bed, wrapped in cloth, like ancient hot water bottles. Firewood, which was in short supply in some regions, was not the only fuel used. Peat was also used as it burned evenly, slowly, and hotly. Peat had to be harvested all summer long, cutting it into bricks from swamps and drying it in the wind. The smell of burning peat was distinctive, sweetish and earthy, and permeated everything around. In treeless areas, even dried manure was used for fuel, which burned surprisingly hot. Controlling a long fire was an art that not everyone could master. It was necessary to know how to stack the fuel so that it burned slowly, giving off heat gradually. At night, the fire was put to sleep by covering the coals with a layer of ash so that they could be rekindled in the morning. Losing the fire was considered a bad omen and a sign of a poor housekeeper. The fire in the hearth could burn for years, passing from one log to another. A massive iron cauldron hung over the fire on a chain hanging from the roof beam. The water in the cauldron, constantly heated, worked like a water heating battery, humidifying the dry air. The steam mixed with the smoke, softening its effect on people's lungs. Hot water was always on hand for washing, drinking, or cooking. The cauldron was a symbol of prosperity and a center of attraction for all the inhabitants. The area around the hearth was the most active part of the house, where the floor was always warm and dry. Wet clothes and shoes were dried here after hunting trips and work. The distance from the fire was strictly regulated by social status. The Jarl, or head of the family, sat closest. Servants and slaves huddled in the corners, content with only the glimmer of warmth. Fire was an instrument of social hierarchy. For lighting, in addition to the hearth, oil lamps made of stone or ceramics were used, filled with fish oil or seal fat. These lamps gave off a dim light and a lot of soot, adding to the smoke in the house. But they allowed people to do crafts on long winter evenings. Light was an expensive resource and was conserved as carefully as heat. Ash from the hearth was never thrown away. It was a valuable chemical raw material. It was used for tanning hides, washing clothes, and even preserving food. Ash also served as an excellent insulator when poured into cracks in the floor. Waste-free production was the basis of the Viking economy. Everything that fire provided was put to use. The long hearth divided the house into two halves, creating an invisible boundary between the male and female parts, or between the hosts and guests. Stepping over the hearth in the wrong place could be taken as an insult. Fire was sacred, and spitting into it or throwing rubbish into it was strictly forbidden. It was a living deity, dwelling in the center of the house. Fire gave life, but how did people sleep when the flames died down in the morning and the cold began to creep in? In the next chapter, you will learn how the Vikings built houses within houses for sleeping. Along the walls of the longhouse were raised platforms, wide wooden platforms that served as the main sleeping area. These platforms were raised above the level of the earthen floor, where the coldest air accumulated. Underneath them, there was space for storing chests and utensils, which created an additional air layer. Sleeping on the ground was a sure way to get pneumonia or rheumatism. Raising the bed by just half a meter significantly changed the temperature. Bedding often consisted of closed wooden boxes or cabinets resembling train compartments. Such bedding had walls and even sliding doors or thick curtains made of animal skins. Climbing inside and closing the door behind them, people found themselves in a tiny, isolated space. The volume of air inside was small, and it could easily be heated by the warmth of one's own body. Inside, these cabinets were lined with hay, straw, and a huge amount of fur skins. Sheepskins, wolf fur, bear skins, all this created a multi-layered insulation. The fur of northern animals is evolutionarily designed to retain heat, and the Vikings took full advantage of this property. People literally buried themselves in fur, creating a cocoon. They often slept in pairs or threes to keep each other warm. Collective sleeping was the norm rather than the exception, and the concept of personal space disappeared in winter. Human body heat is a powerful source of energy, approximately 100 watts per person. 10 people in a cramped compartment worked like a kilowatt heater. Families slept huddled together, pressing their backs against each other. This strengthened social bonds and ensured survival. Sleeping clothes were minimal or non-existent, as woolen clothing absorbed sweat and moisture during the day. Sleeping in wet clothes was dangerous, so clothes were dried by the fire, and people wrapped themselves in dry skins. Skin contact with natural fur provided the best thermoregulation. In the morning, they put on warm, dry clothes, which was a small daily pleasure. Rich Vikings could afford down duvets filled with eider down. Eider down is a unique material that weighs almost nothing but keeps you warmer than any fur. Collecting down was a dangerous and difficult task, so such beds were a symbol of high status. For most people, however, only straw and sheepskin were available. But even that was enough to get through the night. Wooden partitions between sleeping areas also protected against drafts blowing through the large hall. The walls were covered with fabric or carpets to close the gaps between the boards. Inside such a box, a microclimate was created that was humid and warm. In the morning, when people got out, they felt a sharp contrast in temperature. This hardened the body and made it resistant to the cold. Linen bedding was rare. Finely spun wool was more commonly used. Wool has the amazing property of keeping you warm, even when wet. If the roof leaked or condensation dripped from above, a wool blanket saved you from hypothermia. Linen, on the other hand, instantly became a cold compress. The choice of materials was dictated by harsh necessity. Guests slept on benches closer to the fire without the privilege of hiding in a personal box. This was considered an honorable place, as it was warmer there from the coals. However, they were more exposed to smoke and drafts from the entrance. The hierarchy of sleeping places was strictly observed. Thus, a Viking's sleeping place was a complex engineering structure, a thermos inside the house. This allowed the body to recover the energy spent fighting the cold during the day. Sleep was not just rest, but a strategic recharging of batteries.
The sleeping areas, much like a...
Want to know a secret that changes everything we think we know about primitive construction? The walls of Viking houses were never just stacked logs. Between each log was a layer of a unique natural sealant that did not rot and had antiseptic properties. We are talking about sphagnum, a special type of bog moss that the Vikings harvested by the ton. When dried, this moss did not crumble into dust, but became elastic, like a sponge, filling the smallest irregularities in the wood. Caulking the walls was an annual ritual on which the airtightness of the house depended. In the fall, before the first cold weather, all the inhabitants walked around the perimeter of the house, checking the joints. If the moss had fallen out or been pecked out by birds, it was immediately replaced with new moss dipped in tar. The tar protected the moss from moisture and repelled insects that wanted to spend the winter in the warm walls. It was a never-ending battle to maintain the integrity of the thermal envelope. In addition to moss, the Vikings used mazanka, a mixture of clay, manure, and chopped straw. This mixture was used to coat the woven interior partitions and sometimes the exterior walls. The clay provided wind protection, and the hollow straw inside acted like air bubbles in foam. The manure in the mixture gave it plasticity and strength after drying. When prepared correctly, the mixture became as hard as stone and lasted for decades. The corners of the house, the most vulnerable to freezing, were insulated with particular care. They were often made double or rounded on the inside to avoid cold air stagnation. Outside, the corners could be covered with earth or an additional layer of turf. This created a smooth transition from the wall to the surrounding landscape. The house seemed to grow out of the hill, becoming part of it. Inside the house, the walls were often hung with woven carpets or skins. This was not just decoration, but an additional layer of insulation, working on the principle of a modern wall carpet. The layer of air between the wall and the carpet retained heat. preventing it from escaping into the cold logs. The interiors of wealthy homes resembled colorful tents hung with wool tapestries depicting mythological scenes. Here, beauty went hand in hand with functionality. The floor at the junction with the wall also required attention. To prevent the cold from pulling at the feet, long rolls of twisted straw or fabric were laid around the perimeter. These sausages blocked the drafts coming from the lower crowns of the log house. In winter, when snow piled up outside, it provided additional insulation for the lower part of the walls. Snow was never shoveled away from the walls of the house. On the contrary, it was raked closer. Cracks in the logs, which inevitably appeared over time, were filled with a mixture of wax and resin. This composition remained plastic in the cold and prevented the crack from expanding further. The wood played due to changes in humidity, and the house required constant maintenance. The Vikings treated the house as a living being that needed to be cared for and fed. An abandoned house would die and fall into ruin within a couple of seasons. The use of natural materials made the house completely safe for health, except for the smoke. There were no toxic emissions, only the smell of wood, resin, dry herbs, and smoke. It was easy to breathe in such a house when the hearth was burning. The walls breathed, regulating humidity naturally. Excess moisture was absorbed by wood and moss, and when it was dry, it was released back into the air. The construction technology was so well developed that it allowed houses to be built even in treeless Iceland, using imported driftwood and local stone. The principles of insulation remained the same, only the materials changed. Adaptability was the main feature of northern builders. They knew how to create comfort even from stones and mud. But even the warmest walls are useless if a person is dressed incorrectly. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Vikings created clothing that kept them warm even when wet, and why the loom was a strategic weapon. The Vikings knew that cold kills faster than an enemy's sword. Their first line of defense was clothing designed on the principle of layering, which is used today by polar explorers and mountaineers. The basis of everything was wool, a unique material capable of retaining heat even when soaked through. The sheep bred by the Vikings had a special double layer of wool. Long, coarse hair protected from rain, and soft undercoat retained heat. Clothing production was a laborious process that took up all the women's free time. Every house had a vertical loom, and its clatter was the soundtrack of winter. It took months of spinning and weaving to clothe a single warrior. The fabric was made thick, almost felt-like, so that the wind could not blow through it. It was heavy but reliable protection. The bottom layer was usually a linen shirt, which was comfortable against the skin. Linen absorbed sweat and dried quickly, preventing the body from getting cold. A woolen tunic was worn on top, followed by a thick caftan or cloak. The air between the layers of clothing acted as insulation. The more layers, the warmer it was, and the Vikings wore everything they had when they set out on their journeys. Knitting with a single needle, called nalbinding, was a special art. This technique, the predecessor of modern knitting, made it possible to create incredibly durable socks, mittens, and hats. Fabric knitted in this way did not unravel if the thread broke. This was critically important on expeditions, where it was difficult to repair clothing. Mittens were made thick, often felted, so that fingers would not lose mobility in the cold. Viking pants, wide trousers, were gathered below the knee and wrapped with woolen bandages all the way to the shoes. This protected the legs from snow and wind without restricting movement in battle or work. The bandages also supported the veins, acting as compression underwear. Shoes were made from goat or calf leather, impregnated with fat to make them waterproof. Dry grass was stuffed inside the shoes instead of insoles and changed every day. Viking cloaks were not just capes, but real portable tents. Made of coarse wool impregnated with lanolin, natural sheep fat, they were practically waterproof. A warrior could wrap himself in a cloak and sleep on the snow. Cloaks were often lined with fur for extra warmth. A good cloak was considered as valuable as a sword. The head always had to be kept warm. Hats were sewn from fur or felted from wool, covering the ears tightly. Heat loss through the head is enormous, and the Vikings were well aware of this. Hoods were a separate item of clothing, often with a long tail that could be wrapped around the neck like a scarf. The face was protected by growing thick beards, which served as a natural mask against the wind. Women's clothing was also multi-layered: a linen dress, a woolen smock over it, and a warm cape. Women often carried keys and tools on their belts and hid warming stones under their clothes. Children were smaller copies of adults, wrapped in the same layers of wool and fur. Providing warm clothing for the family was the main responsibility of the housewife. Washing woolen items in winter was rare. They were more often frozen and beaten in the snow. This refreshed the fabric and killed parasites without getting it wet. Careful treatment of clothing was dictated by a shortage of resources. Every thread counted. Wool was a strategic resource, no less important than iron. Without sheep, the expansion of the Vikings would have been impossible. The kingdoms of the north were built on the backs of sheep and the labor of weavers. In addition to fire, the Vikings used another source of heat: soapstone or steatite. This soft, easily workable mineral had a unique physical property: enormous heat capacity. A stone pot took longer to heat up than a metal one, but it also cooled down slowly, working like a battery. Soapstone cookware was found in every home and was highly valued. Steatite pots with food always stood on the hearth. The stone allowed the food to simmer rather than boil, preserving maximum nutrients. Even when the fire went out, the soup in such a pot remained hot until morning. This made it possible to have a quick, warm breakfast in the morning without having to light a big fire. The savings in time and fuel were significant. Soapstone was used not only to make dishes, but also portable braziers. Small stone containers were filled with coal and placed under benches or next to sleeping places. The stone gently radiated heat without reaching dangerous temperatures. These were the prototypes of safe heaters. Such a brazier could be taken along in a sleigh on a long journey. Steatite was mined in Norway and exported throughout the Viking world, from Iceland to Britain. Archaeologists find fragments of this pottery thousands of kilometers from the quarries. This shows how important this technology was. People were willing to carry heavy stones across the ocean for their thermal properties. Metal boilers were more prestigious, but stone ones were more practical. Heated pieces of soapstone were used to dry shoes. The stone was placed inside a wet boot, and it gently dried the leather without burning it. Dry shoes are essential for keeping your feet warm. This simple life hack saved people from frostbite on their toes. Flat stones were also used for baking flatbread. The hot stone worked like a non-stick frying pan. Bread was baked quickly using the heat of the coals. The smell of fresh bread mixed with the smell of smoke, creating the aroma of home. The stone absorbed fat and only got better with age. Soapstone was easy to cut with a regular knife, which made it possible to repair dishes. If a pot cracked, it was held together with iron clamps or turned into weights for a loom. Not a single piece of this valuable material was thrown away. Even the dust from processing the stone was added to medicines. The use of stone saved firewood. Food cooked on its own in the stone pot after being removed from the fire. This was important in regions where forests were scarce. Stone cookware was part of an energy-saving strategy. The Vikings knew the geology of their world and knew how to find useful minerals. Steatite was their magic stone that gave off heat. It was dark, greasy to the touch, and warm, like a living creature. Fire and stone provided warmth, but the house needed to breathe. In the next chapter, you will learn how the Vikings controlled invisible air currents to avoid suffocating and freezing. Ventilation in a Viking home was not just a technical detail. It was the boundary between life and death, a fine line that could not be crossed. In the harsh north, any mistake could lead to tragedy. Too little fresh air would cause carbon monoxide poisoning, while too much draft would blow the heat outside, turning the house into an icy trap. Despite its apparent simplicity, the system was only passive at first glance. In reality, it was a complex, well-thought-out mechanism where every crack, board, and stone participated in regulating air flows. The main exhaust channel was the chimney in the roof, an opening around which the entire architecture of the internal microclimate was built. But it was equally important to understand where and how the supply air came from, without which the fire would suffocate in a matter of minutes. Fresh air entered the house not through one large opening, but through many small, deliberately left gaps. Cracks at the bottom of doors, tiny vents made at the very floor, and natural gaps between logs served as entry points. The cold air mass, heavy and dense, spread across the ground without intruding sharply into the warm zone. It slowly warmed up from the ground, from the smoldering coals, and from the heat of human bodies, gradually rising, mixing with the warm layer and pushing the smoke upward. In this way, the house itself turned into a huge, warm pipe where air circulated without stopping. It was a natural pump, operating without pistons, engines, or knowledge of physics, pure practice, based on observation and experience. The Vikings knew how to play with this draft as skillfully as sailors control sails. They could change the cross-section of the openings with a simple movement. Open the door slightly, lift the smoke outlet cover, press the damper. In strong winds, they reduced the airflow so that the house would not be blown away like a blacksmith's bellows. In calm weather, on the contrary, they opened it wider, increasing the combustion of the hearth. All decisions were made not by instruments, but by living signs: how the flame flickered, how the air smelled, how the temperature changed in different parts of the hall. It was engineering based on intuition and generations of observation. But not everything was perfect. Sometimes there was a treacherous reverse draft, in which the wind blew the smoke back inside. To combat this phenomenon, the Vikings came up with clever designs: rotating boards above the roof, special visors, double openings on both sides of the slope. In a house with two chimneys, they opened the one on the leeward side so that the wind could not drive the smoke into the room. This system required constant attention, especially in winter, when strong gusts could reverse the draft in seconds. Ventilation played a key role in combating dampness, the main enemy of any wooden structure. A constant flow of air slowly but surely dried out the logs, turf, and interior partitions, preventing them from becoming moldy. The Vikings understood perfectly well that if the air was stagnant, the house would begin to deteriorate. Drafts were not a threat, but a remedy that prolonged the life of the building and prevented decay. The corners of the house, where the air only partially reached, turned into natural cold rooms. Barrels of pickles, smoked meat, and beer were placed there, products that needed cold temperatures and no air movement. In this way, a complex microclimate was created within a single room, with areas for sleeping, cooking, and storing supplies and utensils. Even without thermometers and hygrometers, the house functioned as a primitive but surprisingly accurate climate control system. In summer, the ventilation switched to a different mode. The doors were opened on both sides, creating a long draft that drove away the heat and smoke. The earthen floor and turf walls gave off the accumulated coolness. As a result, while the sun mercilessly burned the outer walls, it was cooler inside than in the open air. The house became a real refuge from the summer heat. Animals played a special role in the microclimate. In winter, cows and sheep were often kept in an extension or at the far end of a long house. Their breath and body heat became part of the overall heating system, warming the lower layers of air. The smell, of course, was something that had to be endured, but in exchange, the family received an additional layer of natural heating that did not require fuel. The master builders who erected the houses checked the entire system before the inhabitants moved in. Using smoking bundles of herbs, they found places where the air stagnated, or conversely, flowed away too quickly. After such a check, they adjusted the angle of the roof, the height of the walls, and the position of the openings. Each house became a unique organism, adapted to the specific terrain, prevailing winds, and soil moisture. The ability to control air was an art that no one saw, but everyone felt. The Vikings did not know the terms convection and differential pressure, but they could feel the movement of air currents perfectly with their skin, breath, and hearing. They lived within the flow, understanding it as deeply as sailors understand wind and water. And thanks to this, they created homes that not only protected them from nature, but worked in harmony with it.
Though the winter winds howl outside, our spirits remain strong, fueled by mead and the glory of those who came before us.
For the Vikings, winter was not just a season, but a siege waged by nature against man. Preparations for it began in the spring. Stocking up on firewood, peat, food, repairing houses, everything was subordinated to one goal: to survive the darkness and cold. People's psychological state during this period was at its limit. Conflict arose from the limited space, darkness, monotonous food, and cramped conditions. Winter melancholy was a well-known affliction. To combat it, the Vikings held feasts, told sagas, and played games. Social activity was a way to keep from going mad. The feasts of Yule, the winter solstice, were the culmination of winter. Abundant food and beer helped people survive the darkest days. It was a celebration of life in the midst of death. The fire burned brighter, people laughed louder, defying the night. Food supplies were strictly calculated. Hunger was a real threat. If winter dragged on, they had to slaughter livestock that they had been saving for milk. The decision to slaughter a cow was a tragedy, meaning a hungry spring. Diseases spread instantly in confined spaces. If one person fell ill, everyone fell ill. Caring for the sick was the responsibility of women. Knowledge of herbs and spells was the only medicine.
Let this sickness pass, protect us all.
Leaving the house in winter was a dangerous adventure. Snowdrifts could be taller than a person. People dug tunnels in the snow to get to the barn or the well. The world shrank to the size of the house. However, winter was also a time for crafts. Men repaired weapons and carved wood, while women wove. The items created during the long winter evenings were decorated with intricate carvings. Art was born out of boredom and darkness. Spring came as a liberation. The first ray of sunlight that broke into the house was greeted as a miracle. People went outside, pale, thin, but alive. They had conquered another winter. This cycle of life and death tempered the character of the Vikings. They were not afraid of hardship because their whole life was a struggle. Their home was their ship, sailing through the winter storm. Their survival techniques were simple but effective. They relied on nature rather than fighting it. And that was their main secret. The story of Viking winter life is not just a story about firewood and walls. It is a story of incredible human resilience and ingenuity. They turned turf, wood, and smoke into tools that allowed them to thrive on the edge of the inhabited world. Their homes were masterpieces of eco-friendly engineering, where every detail had a purpose. Looking at their experience, we understand that comfort is not only about modern gadgets, but also about the ability to understand the world around us. Which ancient insulation technique surprised you the most? Would you like to spend a night in such a longhouse to test yourself? Write in the comments what other aspects of Viking life you would like to learn about. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and see you on new journeys into the past.